Welcome back. It's been a while. I'm Todd, and have you ever just sat down and wondered how many murders surrounded Annalise and the Keating crew over the course of 90 episodes? And then did you Google it? Yeah, well, me too. So in this video, we're gonna go through all 6 seasons of How to Get Away with Murder and determine the murder count. So you don't have to Google it, unless you did, and it landed you here. In that case, you've come to the right place. And obviously, spoilers ahead. So if you haven't finished the entire series, don't be here. It's on Netflix. Go watch it. We'll be briefly revisiting every iconic and some not so iconic murder scenes, tally them up, then crown the person who committed the most murders the murder master. Although I can tell you right now, I'm 100% sure it's Frank, because Frank. But before we get started, thank you for watching. I do release new videos when I release them, so if you want to stay in the loop, hit subscribe and that thumbs up to see more videos like this one. Now, let's set some ground rules. Number 1, this is a murder list. Keyword, murder. I will not be counting suicides. One person had to have killed the other. Number 2, I won't be counting murders committed by a client Annalise picked up unless the murder occurred during the case. And number 3, that's 6, the only person that commits the actual murder will be given the kill count. So no accomplices will be counted. Okay, with that said, this is the murder counter. Boop. So strap in, grab some snacks, and let's get to the murders. Cue opener. Alright, so we start here in season 1 with none other than Sam Keating in episode 9 as our number 1. The death that will loom over us all over the course of the series. So, who killed Sam? If we're being technical, Nate sent Rebecca into the Keating house to hack Sam's computer for information, using a little USB drive. But when Sam finds her snooping, Wes, Laurel, Connor, and Michaela show up. Things get a little tense, there's a scuffle, Michaela defensively pushes Sam over the banister where he lands with a thud, but Michaela didn't kill him. The fatal final blow is delivered by Wes, straight to the head with Lady Justice herself to protect Rebecca. But with Laurel, Connor, Michaela, and Rebecca present, they become accomplices along with Annalise, who happen to be there too. But this murder's on Wes though. Next up is a death from the past, but we don't actually find out about it until Mama Ophelia comes to town. And this murder is our number 2, Clyde Harkness, Annalise's uncle. After AK's mother Ophelia found out the piece of trash man was sexually abusing an adolescent Anna Mae, she burned the house to the ground with Clyde inside. Go ahead, girl. Though it isn't present day, it's still a murder, and it's being counted. Next up is our number 3, Lila Stangard. Lila was Sam's pregnant mistress, and like Clyde, although the murder occurred much before Sam's, the killer isn't revealed until much after. So she was murdered by strangulation and disposed of in a water tank by Frank via orders coming from Sam. But remember, she was pregnant and keeping the baby, so number 4 is unborn Keating kid, also killed by Frank, which, if you know how this all ends, means Frank killed his own sibling. Sad. Okay, and moving on, last murder of season 1 is our number 5, and Rebecca Sutter. A lot of death happened in this episode. While she was killed at the end of season 1, the killer isn't revealed until season 2, and that killer is Bonnie. She throws a plastic bag over Rebecca's head, resulting in asphyxiation, and thinking what she's doing is right, Bonnie does it to protect Annalise, which actually kind of parallels Lila's murder with Frank doing it for Sam. Except for the part where Annalise never asked for this. Next up, I'll simply mention Grant and Ursula Hapstall for story purposes, but it won't be included because the murder took place before Annalise took on the case. Want to know a murder that takes place after AK takes on the case though? Our number 6, and first of season 2, Helena Hapstall, Grant's sister. Now, it's believed that she and her brother had an incestuous child named Philip, which is either great foreshadowing or they recycled this twist for Sam and Hannah, but we'll get there much later. Now, Helena was left in her car with her throat slit, and the murderer was Caleb Hapstall, who happens to also be the one that murdered Grant and Ursula. All right, let's move on to number 7, and maybe murder, maybe not murder. Anyway, it's Nia Leahy. She's Nate's wife, the one he was cheating on with Annalise. Also, the same one who had cancer, like stage 4 cancer, which is kind of up. So she's suffering, wants to end it, and asks Annalise because she knows about the affair. But after AK declines, Nia moves on to Nate, who does the deed. So clearly this is debatable. While it isn't a brutal murder, pulling someone's plug, whether the person consented to it or not, and then covering it up could still be considered murder. So it's going on the list. Now, our number 8 is our mid-season finale reveal. Emily St. Clair. She was run over by Asher after his anger got the best of him because she was talking that shit. But then her body was thrown off the Hapstall mansion by Bonnie so they could pin the murder on Catherine, the other Hapstall. Make sense? Great! Moving on. Now our number 9 is another one from the past and revealed through a flashback. This one is Sam Keating Jr. This was the child of Annalise and Sam, which is kind of obvious. After Frank, paid by Wallace Mahoney, arranges a car accident for Annalise, she's rushed to the hospital where Sam Keating Jr. arrives stillborn due to the trauma. So Frank killed yet another one of his siblings, which is double sad. And speaking of Wallace Mahoney, our final murder of season 2 comes in the form of number 10, Wallace Mahoney. So Wes thinks Wallace is his biological father. Spoiler alert, he isn't. Wes's biological father is Charles Mahoney, Wallace's son. But that's besides the point. While Wes is confronting Wallace, he's shot in the head from a distance by Frank. Frank hoping to make amends for being the cause of Sam Jr.'s death. Now, too bad that doesn't work because it leads us to the first death of season 3. Number 11, Butchman. He's a hitman Annalise hired using Sam's life insurance money to find Frank, who's currently on the run, and take him out. Now, no surprise that Frank kills him. Also, no surprise Frank killed number 12, Robert Winterbottom, Bonnie's piece of shit father. Dude was in prison and already on his way out, so Frank sneaks in as a janitor and replaces his oxygen tank with one filled with hydrogen sulfide? He does it for Bonnie, obviously. Now, we go from the most justified murder to the least with number 13, Wes Gibbons. Okay, so hopefully I get this right, but apparently Wes was in talks with the police regarding Sam's murder, and then that one time Wes shot Annalise. Y'all remember that, right? Anyway, this would be throwing Laurel under the bus as well. And obviously, Laurel's father, Jorge Castillo, always had moles inside of the police department because he finds out, and in order to protect Antares, his shady company, about to go public, he arranges to have Dominic, his flunky, take Wes out and make it look like an accident. So Wes is ambushed, suffocated, maybe has a rib broken by Connor, possibly, and then burned in the fire that engulfed Annalise's house. Whew. All right, and look at that. He was the last death of season 3, which I'm totally fine with because it was already a lot to deal with. So starting up in season 4, this season has the least amount of deaths. A lot of close calls and fake outs, but only 2 actual murders. The first one being our number 14, Dominic Flores. Yeah, the same one that killed Wes. So Dominic was working for Sandrine, or Jorge, or both. I don't know, it's a little unclear. Either way, he posed a potential threat toward Laurel, so naturally, Frank snapped his neck after interrogating him. But this backfires as Laurel was hoping to turn Dominic to her side. Now, yeah, this is when the whole Castillo thing was getting just a little out of hand. But next up is number 15, Todd Denver. After discovering that after discovering that Denver was playing him, Jorge Castillo arranged a car accident to take him out. Denver also made AK's life a living hell, threatened Bonnie, and I'm pretty sure kidnapped Connor. So I'm not saying good riddance or anything, but moving on to season 5, our first murder is another reference to the past, and it involves Bonnie. Number 16 is unnamed Winterbottom baby boy. That's a lot to say. Turns out that Bonnie got pregnant at some point in her past while her father was being a major disgusting piece of shit. And you should already know why. And although the How to Get Away with Murder writers really wanted us to think Connor, Gabriel, or even that random guy Cody was Bonnie's child, turns out it was none of them. Unnamed baby boy Winterbottom was taken from the hospital and then buried in the woods by Bonnie's sister, Julie. She did it to protect the baby from the evils of their father. And poor Bonnie never really catches a break on this show. Speaking of catching a break, number 17 was just freed from a justice system that failed him and had building a relationship with his son to look forward to. This one hurt, and yes, you've probably guessed it by now, it's Nate Leahy Sr., or Pops. as many of us know him by. So for this one here, even though the death occurs in episode 6, the true motive and murderer isn't revealed until much later. And that's Xavier Castillo, along with his pal, Governor Burkhead. And they wanted to weaken AK street cred after her big win. Moving on from there, we get another casualty in the brewing war between Annalise and Governor Burkhead. Number 18 is DA Ronald Miller, who was also dating Bonnie at the time. And speaking of Bonnie, she's the one that kills him after Nate beats him to a bloody pulp. Okay, let's rewind. Nate falsely accuses Miller of being behind his pops' death with convincing evidence, by the way. So he kicks his ass, and Bonnie, stumbling upon the gory mess, takes Miller out of his misery by suffocating him. And this poor woman is surrounded by death. Well, they all are, but mainly Bonnie. Number 19 is Sandrine Castillo, and I mean, it's hard to tell when this death actually happened or if she's actually even dead, but it was confirmed later in season 6, so we can count it here, considering her scalp was sent to Laurel and the rest of the Keating crew via FedEx. Apparently, she was a threat to the male Castillos, and they had her killed, probably with a hitman or whatever it is those evil business guys do. Now, I'm still unsure if Xavier was involved because killing your own mother is like some really evil shit. So I'm gonna put this death on Jorge. Okay, and also in this same episode and murdered by the same person, we have our number 20, which is Emmett Crawford. Again, the murderer isn't revealed until later, but we see it happen and he's confirmed dead in the premiere of season 6, so we counting it. Turns out Emmett was next in line to become the next district attorney, but because he ain't no puppet, Jorge poisoned him. And while in cahoots with Burkhead, they also frame him for Nate Sr.'s death. So this rabbit hole certainly goes pretty deep. Now, while we're here in season 6, let's move on to our number 21, Paul DeSoto. Now, you may be saying, Todd, who the fork is Paul DeSoto? Well, angry viewer, if you give me a second, I'll explain. Paul was Vivian Maddox's boyfriend at a given time, and although his death was written off as a drug overdose, it was actually murder committed by Gabriel. In efforts to protect his mother, Gabriel provides Paul with the drugs with every intention of him overdosing. And I believe Gabriel's confession happens around the beginning of season 6 or so, or whatever, so we just put that in here. Anyway, next up, and the big one of the season, is number 22, Asher Millstone. And the build up to this one was something fierce, I'll tell you that much. But Asher, law student turned FBI informant against Annalise, is bludgeoned to death with a fireplace poker. By who? It could be anyone. And although the murder is pinned on Michaela and Connor in order to turn them into informants too, the true murderer is revealed to be none other than Agent Murderer, or Agent Pollock, which is her actual name, I guess. Either way, she was a dirty FBI agent secretly working for Xavier and Governor Burkhead. Luckily, Gabriel witnesses the murder take place and she gets what's coming to her. I think. We never actually find out what her punishment is, but we're just gonna assume it's prison? Next up, we begin taking out our main bad guys. Starting with number 23, Xavier Castillo. Now, Xavier's done his fair share of evil mustache twisting and torture, but this time he ends up in the torture chair when Frank randomly comes across him while trailing Agent Pollock from before. Now, after roughing up Xavier a bit, Frank invites Nate to the scene, and there's this whole thing about Nate being an FBI informant too, and Frank hopes he can sway Nate by delivering his father's killer on a silver platter and whatever. Anyway, after Xavier confesses to being involved with Nate Sr.'s murder, Nate snaps his neck for justice and a secret plan to target the FBI and Burkhead. Alright, and after that, we get to number 24, Hannah Keating, the big mastermind behind the FBI targeting Annalise, who doesn't even show up in person to antagonize Annalise in the final season. But she gets murdered in her home right after having Annalise sign an NDA regarding her love child, Frank, with her brother, Sam. Keeping up? Okay, so there's no absolute truth here because it's never actually verbally confessed, but it's incredibly likely that Governor Burkhead was behind this one, as with Xavier dead, Hannah would be the only loose end to tie up. So that's that on that. And next up is number 25, Jorge Castillo. This guy's been in jail and still been a pain in the ass. Anyway, in probably one of the most satisfying deaths of the show, Jorge is killed very similarly to Nate Sr., in prison and unexpectedly. Turns out my girl Tegan and Laurel, both victims of Jorge's web of death, team up to arrange his murder. And on top of that, Jorge knows Tegan was the Jane Doe that sent him to jail in the first place. And that's a little dangerous, so he gets stabbed by some inmates, obviously paid by rich-ass Laurel. Now it's time for the big one herself. Number 26 is Governor Lynn Burkhead. Similar to the previous murder, probably one of the more satisfying deaths because she did put Annalise and those kids through literal hell. So after AK is named not guilty in the case surrounding the long murder list that follows her and the Keating crew, and I mean seriously, the FBI barely tapped the surface of it if you look at this list, but Burkhead is shot on the front steps of the courthouse after the trial by Frank as one last action to protect Annalise, because number 27 is Frank Delfino. So Frank, after coming through with a recording of Xavier and Hannah talking about working with Burkhead, is shot down by the cops when he takes out the governor. Now, this can be considered a suicide, as there's no way Frank thought he'd shoot the governor in public and live to talk about it. But realistically, there could have been the possibility of an arrest here. Plus, it's my video and I make the rules. He was murdered by the cops. And so was number 28, and the final murder on this list, Bonnie Winterbottom. And I say the cops are responsible for this one too, because there's no way Frank would let Bonnie get caught in the crossfire intentionally. So yeah, Bonnie was caught in the crossfire, shot, and then dies in Annalise's arms on the front steps of the courthouse. And that, my friends, is the complete murder count for the entire How to Get Away with Murder series. Now, let's get to some fun statistics. So the top murderer of the show, How to Get Away with Murder, didn't end up getting away with murder. Was he not paying attention? Anyway, as I predicted, it was Frank at a landslide. Throughout the course of the show, he murdered 8 of the total 28 people. Yikes. And this includes Lila and Sam's baby, Sam Keating Jr., Wallace Mahoney, Butchman, Robert Winterbottom, Dominic Flores, and Governor Burkhead. Damn. Far second was Jorge Castillo at 4 murders, and Burkhead being involved with 3. Now, season 6 had the most total murders with 8, while season 4 had the least with only 2. And for a show named How to Get Away with Murder, they weren't really delivering the murder that season, were they? Finally, the episode with the most murders is season 6, episode 15, which is also the finale, with a total of 4. And that seems appropriate. So that's all, folks. I counted 28 total murders that occurred over the course of this show. And quite frankly, I'm surprised the FBI didn't come after her sooner after revisiting all of these. Oh, and I didn't include Tegan's family from the plane crash because it wasn't really confirmed to be murder, only like heavily assumed that Jorge was behind it. Plus, I don't know how many people it included, so if I missed any other murders, let me know in the comments down below. But thanks again so much for watching, and I really hope you enjoyed this video. Obviously, I got this idea from the channel Dead Meat, so check out his channel sometime, and if you haven't already, check out mine too, or feel free to click on one of my other videos. Yeah, don't forget to hit that thumbs up, it really helps me out. Then subscribe with a side of notification bell. Until next time, shine on, you crazy diamonds.